Hi, everybody. This is Kate Huff, and welcome to Thursdays in the Workshop, where today we're going to focus on best practices when teaching over Zoom. This workshop actually took place on January 28th, and I thought that I was recording, but I wasn't. So I'm going to create a new workshop specifically for my asynchronous participants, and I know that any video that is longer than about 6 or 7 minutes, I lose 50% of my audience, and the same is true for our students. And so I'm going to break this particular workshop down into shorter chunks of time. Today we're going to focus on the whiteboard, the class agenda, chat, flipped classroom, polls, and breakout rooms. Some of these are tools specifically in Zoom that allow you to increase student engagement in your synchronous sessions. Using an agenda and a flipped classroom approach will help you also to increase engagement. But let's look at the first tool in Zoom, and that's called the whiteboard. So the whiteboard is exactly that. It is an online version of a classroom whiteboard where you can have all the students at one time type in answers to a question or problem that you pose. And so I have one set up here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that screen. And I have a Zoom meeting going on in the background that I'm not recording, this time intentionally, however. And so to get to the whiteboard, as the instructor, you hit share screen. And you probably have seen this 1,000 times, but like me, you may not have even noticed whiteboard. And you select whiteboard and hit share. And this is what all the students will see, right? And I was doodling earlier, so I can select that and delete it. But a whiteboard is a really good tool to use and set it up at the beginning of class where students are entering your Zoom class. They will see a whiteboard, and you can have a question already posed. And as students come in, they can simply answer the question. I'll go ahead and delete that. Now, for me, my tools automatically showed up on the screen, so I knew that I could select the text tool to type out an answer to this. However, not every student may have those tools available right away. So if they don't see if they don't see their toolbar, just ask them to go to View Options, which is typically at the top of the screen, and then choose Annotate. And by doing this, they will then have their toolbar on their screen. They can type out answers, right? As the instructor, you can move things around. I don't think that your students will have the ability to move answers around. They're going to have to get things out of their system, like draw things, and they will, and that's fine. I have a K-12 background, and when I taught high school, I understood that if I didn't give students something to do at the beginning of class, something to focus on, that they would find something else to do. And I would argue that underclassmen are similar in many ways, or can be similar in many ways. And so this really helps students to focus in on the topic at hand that you want to cover. One professor yesterday in the workshop talked about how there could be a pro-con list, and as the instructor, he could divide the answers and create that pro-con and move things around for the students. Okay, so that's whiteboard. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and that's how you would stop sharing the whiteboard, and then you could go in to share something else. And I'm going to go ahead and bring the presentation back up and moving on. Now, I know that you have definitely used chat in Zoom before, and it's a great place to ask students to post questions and to monitor student questions as class happens. And I also think it's a really good practice to ask a student or TA to monitor the chat. As instructors, you know you are really focused on the content and teaching the content at hand and managing your class. And sometimes it's really hard to pay attention to the chat. So you can ask a student to monitor that and to pose questions and to even interrupt with questions throughout the class. But another way that you can use chat is to emulate a live tweeting event. And so at the beginning of class, assign 1 or 2 students to basically summarize and just type out the main points as class is happening. And you can save a chat, and that summary throughout the session can actually help students remember what was happening or what happened in that class, what was covered. And that also gives 1 or 2 students something engaging to focus on, where they can focus on the lecture and think about what are the main points that I need to include in this back channel, in this conversation that's going on sort of behind the scenes. You can also use chat as a back channel if you're asking your students to perhaps participate in a debate. So in this example, you might have one half of your class participating in some sort of debate, and then the other half would comment and respond to the debate. They could pose their own arguments or observations about what they see their classmates doing in that quote unquote fishbowl. And so those are some ways where you can use chat in a different way to increase engagement in your Zoom class. The next video will talk about the agenda, practicing with the Zoom controls, as well as a flipped classroom approach. Stay tuned.